Every single morning, without fail, something happens on a street in Chicago that makes people stop and forget what they were doing. A boy, small, maybe 7 years old, walks down the sidewalk with 7 Belgian Malinois flanking him. Not one, not two, 7. Each one the size of a small wolf, moving around him in a formation so tight, so precise, it doesn't look like a walk, it looks like an escort. And it happens every single morning. Same time, same route, same dogs, same silence. Cars slow down, joggers pull out their phones, a woman at the cafe on the corner puts her coffee down just to watch him pass. Kids point, parents pull them closer. The whole block holds its breath for 30 seconds every day, and then it's over, and he's gone, and no one can explain what they just saw. The question everyone asked was the same: who is this kid? Because here's what was strange. He never smiled, he never waved, he never looked scared either, not once. He walked like someone who had already accepted something the rest of the world hadn't figured out yet. And the dogs, every single one of them, moved around him like he was the only person on earth that mattered. Some neighbors thought it was heartwarming, a little boy and his dogs, something sweet, something innocent. But others, the ones who watched more carefully, the ones who noticed the way the dogs scanned the rooftops, the way they shifted when a car slowed too long, those people felt something different. They felt uneasy, and they couldn't say why. Then people started trying to get closer. It didn't work. Every single time someone stepped off the sidewalk toward the boy, a jogger, a neighbor, even a friendly old man with a wave, one of the dogs moved, not barking, not lunging, just there, blocking, a wall of muscle and locked eyes that said one thing with no room for argument: stay back. But one gray morning in late October, someone didn't listen. A man walking his own dog decided to follow the boy, at a distance, just out of curiosity. He kept his phone recording the whole time. And what he saw at the end of that walk, what he captured on that video, was something no one in that neighborhood was prepared for. When the truth finally came out, it didn't just shake the block, it made national news. Because the secret this boy had been carrying, the secret those 7 dogs had been protecting, was so enormous, so devastating that people couldn't believe a child had been living with it. This is that story, and if you think you know what it is, you don't, not yet. Like and subscribe if you want to see how this ends, and drop your country in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're watching this from. Now, let's go back to where it all started. The neighborhood of Lakeview on Chicago's north side was the kind of place where mornings were supposed to be boring. Tree-lined streets, brownstones with green awnings, a corner cafe that opened at 6 and smelled like fresh coffee by 6:15. It was quiet, it was predictable, and until a boy named George Reynolds started walking through it every morning with 7 Belgian Malinois at his side, it had absolutely no reason to make anyone's heart race. Lakeview was the kind of neighborhood where nothing happened. Tree-lined streets, brownstones with green awnings, a corner cafe called Mabel's that opened at 6 and filled the block with the smell of coffee by 6:15. People walked their dogs, kids waited for the school bus, nothing out of the ordinary. Not until George Reynolds started showing up. Every morning at exactly 6:45, he appeared at the end of Maple Avenue. Same time, same spot. Leash in one hand, the other hanging loose at his side. And behind him, around him, 7 Belgian Malinois locked into formation. 2 out front, scanning. 2 tied on either side. 2 holding the rear. The 7th, a slightly smaller male named Buddy, circling the outside of the whole group like a slow, golden orbit. It was the kind of sight that made people forget what they were doing. At Mabel's, the owner paused mid-pour, coffee drifting over the rim of a mug, watching the boy pass the window. A jogger on the opposite sidewalk slowed to a stop, earbuds still in, mouth slightly open. A mother on her front porch pulled her daughter closer without thinking about it, the way you do when something feels off but you can't name it. The dogs moved like they were being paid to do this, which in a way they were. Their eyes didn't wander. They didn't sniff the ground or chase a squirrel or pull at the leash. They rotated positions in subtle shifts, a front dog dropping back, a side dog moving up, as if following a script no one else could read. Twice during the walk, Milo, the largest of the group, tilted his head toward a second-floor window and held his gaze there for 3 full seconds before moving on. No one lived in that apartment, but Milo checked it anyway. People tried to say hello. A jogger cut across the street. An old man stepped off his porch with a wave. A teenage girl from 2 houses down tried to get close enough to pet one of them. Every single time, a dog was there first, not growling, not lunging, just filling the gap between George and whoever had stepped too close. A wall, a quiet, firm, absolute wall. The message didn't need words. George himself said nothing, not once. He walked the route in silence, eyes forward, face unreadable. The only moment anything close to human connection happened was when Mrs. Okafor, the elderly woman on the corner, raised her hand in a small wave. George nodded, once. That was it. That was the whole conversation. Within a week, someone had filmed it. Within 2 days after that, the video had been watched 40,000 times. The theories spread fast. Celebrity kid, witness protection, some kind of science experiment. But one man on the block, a retired officer named Harold Vickers, watched the footage 3 times and said nothing about any of those theories. He noticed something else, something small, something the others missed entirely. Buddy kept nudging a specific pocket on his own vest jacket, the same pocket every single time, with a quiet, almost anxious urgency, like he was checking to make sure something was still there. It always was. Dana Castillo saw the video on a Tuesday night, scrolling after a long day covering a city council zoning dispute. 43,000 views. A boy, 7 dogs, a street in Lakeview. She watched it 3 times, closed her laptop, and drove to Chicago the next morning. She found Maple Avenue easily, found the cafe, found a bench across the street where she could sit with a coffee and wait. At 6:44, she set her phone to record. At 6:45, George appeared at the end of the block exactly where the video showed he would. Same formation, same silence, same boy. Dana waited until he was halfway down the street, then stood up and stepped off the curb. She made it 4 steps. Milo was simply there, between her and George, low to the ground, body broad, a growl that was less a sound and more a vibration she felt in her chest. Not aggressive, not a threat, a statement. Dana raised both hands and backed up. Milo watched her until she was back on the sidewalk. Then he turned and rejoined the formation without a sound. She spent the rest of the morning talking to people. The owner at Mabel's leaned against the counter and shook her head. She's never said a word to me, not one. The jogger Dana tacked down 2 blocks away was more specific. They've never hurt anyone, but they've never let anyone close either. It's like there's an invisible line. Dana wrote that down. Then she went to see Harold Vickers. Vickers was on his porch when she arrived, coffee in hand, watching the street the way a man watches something he already understands. He listened to her questions, then set his mug down. "Those dogs aren't walking with him," he said. "They're guarding him. That's a full canine protective detail. I haven't seen formation like that since active operations." Dana came back the next morning. Same bench, same coffee. Halfway through the walk, something happened that she hadn't seen in the video. A black SUV rolled slowly past the end of Maple Avenue. Tinted windows. It didn't stop. Every single dog froze at the same instant. Not a growl, not a shift in formation, a complete coordinated lock. 7 animals going still at exactly the same moment, like someone had flipped a switch. George's eyes moved toward the SUV. Just once, a flicker. Then he kept walking, and the dogs resumed, and the street went quiet again. Dana lowered her phone. She hadn't been watching George when it happened, but when she turned back, he was already looking at her. 1 second, no more. His expression wasn't frightened, it was tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from sleep. Dana closed her notebook and sat there for a long time after he'd gone, turning that look over in her mind. She wasn't chasing a story anymore. She was chasing something that had already found her. Chief Diane Marlowe didn't watch the video herself. Someone on her staff forwarded it with a one-line note, "This is going to become a problem." She watched it once, then by end of day, officers Kevin Hansen and Sarah Rivera had their assignment. Quiet, observe, find out what's happening on Maple Avenue. They went the next morning. Hansen spotted George first. Gray hoodie, teal shirt, 7 dogs in that formation the whole internet had been talking about. He and Rivera hung back, keeping casual distance, hands in their jacket pockets. Normal, relaxed, just 2 people on a sidewalk. They made it 20 feet before Luna and Scar peeled out of the formation and dropped into a V directly across the path. No barking, no lunging. 2 dogs, side by side, filling the gap like a locked gate. Rivera shifted her weight. Hansen held up a hand. They stopped. The dogs held for 10 seconds. Then they turned and slotted back into formation without a sound. Hansen and Rivera tried a different approach. They fell back, half a block behind, opposite side of the street, civilian distance, nothing threatening. Bright noticed immediately. She peeled off the rear and dropped back, facing the wrong way, facing Hansen and Rivera. Not growling, not advancing, just watching, tracking every step with the kind of steady, unblinking attention that made Rivera stop pretending this was casual. "She knows we're here," Rivera said quietly. They kept following, and then it happened. A cyclist cut through the sidewalk, fast, head down, not watching where he was going. He was going to hit George. No time to shout, no time to do anything except watch. Milo moved. Not a lunge, not dramatic. He stepped into the cyclist's path and put his shoulder into the front wheel, a firm, controlled body check that redirected the bike to the left without breaking stride. The cyclist swerved, stumbled, caught himself. No contact with George, no harm to anyone. Less than a second. Hansen pulled out his radio. "These dogs aren't following the kid, they are protecting him. This is an active detail." Rivera watched George continue down the street like nothing had happened. Then she asked the question that had been sitting under everything since the beginning. From what? Hansen didn't answer. Neither of them had one yet. But by the end of that week, a formal investigation had been quietly opened, and the story had spread well beyond Chicago. Something was building. Everyone on Maple Avenue could feel it. That particular tightness in the air that comes just before something breaks open. The black SUV appeared on a Tuesday morning, parked 3 houses down from George's brownstone with its engine idling and windows tinted so dark you couldn't see anything inside. Just a shape, a presence, a threat that didn't need to announce itself. The dog saw it before anyone else did. Milo and Max dropped into a crouch so fast it looked choreographed, their bodies going low and tight against George's legs. Luna's ears flanked against her skull. Scar didn't bark. He didn't need to. His lip curled back slow and deliberate, teeth showing in a way that made the air feel colder. The other 4 closed ranks around the boy until there was no gap, no opening, no way to reach him without going through all 7 of them first. George didn't flinch. He didn't even look at the SUV. He just kept walking, same pace, same route, like he'd seen this before, like he'd been expecting it. Dana was across the street with her camera when it happened. She caught the plate number, ran it that afternoon. Dead end. Registered to a shell company that didn't exist on paper past 6 months ago. No owner, no address, nothing. The SUV came back the next day, same spot, same idle, same tinted silence, and the day after that. It never moved closer, never followed, just watched, waited, studied. Mr. Vickers saw it on the third morning and pulled Dana aside at the cafe. His voice was low, certain. "That's reconnaissance," he said. "Whoever's in that car is mapping the routine. They're looking for a gap in the protection, a moment when the dogs aren't tight, when the boy is vulnerable." He paused, eyes on the SUV. "They're not amateurs." Dana's stomach turned. This wasn't a custody thing. This wasn't a concerned relative or an overprotective ex. This was something else, something calculated. That afternoon she passed George on his walk, closer than usual, careful not to spook the dogs. She expected him to stay silent like always, but he didn't. He turned his head just slightly, and his voice came out quiet, steady, too old for a 7-year-old boy. "They've been watching for a long time." Then he kept walking. The dogs moved with him, and Dana stood there on the sidewalk, heart pounding, realizing she had just heard his first words, and they were a warning. That night she drove past his street after dark. The SUV was still there, parked under a broken streetlight, waiting. And through the window of George's house she could see all 7 dogs, not sleeping, not resting, just sitting in a line facing the street, heads up, eyes forward, awake, ready. The next morning the SUV was there again, and the morning after. Twice on Thursday, once at dawn, once at dusk. The pattern was tightening, the net was closing. The dogs never relaxed anymore. Even inside, even at night, they stayed alert. The neighborhood felt it too, that creeping unease, the sense that something was coming and no one knew when it would break. Dana wasn't investigating a heartwarming story anymore. She was circling something dangerous, and whatever it was circling back. 2 years ago, on a Thursday night in August, Jack Reynolds sat cross-legged on the living room floor throwing a tennis ball down the hallway while Milo sprinted after it like his life depended on it. Becca laughed from the couch, bare feet tucked under her, watching George, 5 years old then, gap-toothed and wild-haired, get absolutely demolished by Lucy's tongue across his entire face. It was warm. It was normal. It was home. But even then, even in that moment, the dog's eyes would flicker toward the windows, a passing car, a footstep on the sidewalk. They were always working, always watching. Later that night, after George was asleep, Jack and Becca sat at the kitchen table with mugs of cold coffee and a file spread between them. They spoke in low voices, careful voices, because they were close, so close to cracking a trafficking operation that had been running product through Chicago's South Side for half a decade. Names, routes, money trails, everything. They just needed one more piece. 3 weeks later, Jack burst through the front door at 2 in the morning, breathless, eyes wild. "They found out. We have to move. Now!" Becca was already moving before he finished the sentence. She grabbed the backpack from the hall closet, the one they had packed months ago and prayed they'd never need, and strapped it onto George, who was half asleep, confused, stumbling in his pajamas. The dogs snapped to attention, all 7 of them. The shift in energy hit them like voltage. Every instinct, every hour of training, every command embedded into their bones, it all activated at once. Becca knelt in front of George, hands on his small face, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me. You run with them. You don't stop. You don't look back. They will keep you safe. Do you understand?" George nodded. He didn't understand. Not really. Not yet. Jack's voice came sharp and clear across the room. One word, one command. The dogs moved into formation, a tight circle around George, bodies low, eyes forward, absolute, unbreakable. Jack and Becca stepped back, Their hands found each other for just a second, then they let go. The explosion tore through the house like the earth cracking open. The dogs moved, George moved with them, through smoke, through heat, through shattered glass and falling beams, and the smell of burning wood, out the back door, into the darkness, into the night. He didn't look back, just like his mother said. Dawn broke cold and gray over the edge of Humboldt Park. George sat on the ground beneath a cluster of trees, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. 7 Belgian Malinois surrounded him in a perfect circle, all facing outward, all watching. Buddy, the oldest, the steadiest, stepped forward and nudged George's shoulder with his nose, gentle, certain. George leaned into him and cried. He cried until there was nothing left. And the dogs stayed. They didn't move. They didn't leave. They just stayed. Because that was the mission. That was the promise. And strapped inside Buddy's vest, hidden in a waterproof pocket George didn't even know existed, was a flash drive containing 2 years of evidence. Names, dates, transactions, everything Jack and Becca had died to protect. Everything the cartel would kill to get back. Ruth Reynolds didn't want to talk. Not to Dana, not to the police, not to anyone. She had spent 2 years keeping her head down, keeping George safe, keeping the world at arm's length because that was the only way she knew how to survive what her brother and sister-in-law had left behind. But when Chief Marlowe showed up at her door with a DEA badge and a federal agent named Lydia Chen, Ruth finally broke. They sat in her living room, George upstairs with the dogs, door closed, and Ruth told them everything. The years Jack and Becca spent undercover, the fake identities, the late-night phone calls in whispered Spanish, the way they trained the dogs not just to protect George, but to move with him, to think for him, to become his shield if the worst ever happened. And it did. Agent Chen leaned forward, arms on her knees, voice steady. The case your brother and his wife were building, it was real. It was massive, multi-state trafficking operation, millions of dollars, dozens of arrests waiting to happen. She paused. But the evidence they collected was never recovered. We assumed it was destroyed in the explosion. Dana's mind was already turning. She thought about Buddy, about the way he moved differently than the other dogs, about the tactical vest he always wore even inside the house, about the way George's hand would rest on it sometimes, absent-minded, like it was a comfort. "Ruth," Dana said carefully, "did Jack or Becca ever say anything about the dogs carrying something? Anything hidden?" Ruth's face went white. "No, I didn't know. I just thought the vests were part of the training." Chen stood up fast. "Where's the dog?" 5 minutes later, Buddy was standing in the middle of the living room, calm as ever, while Agent Chen ran her hands carefully along the seams of his vest. She found it in the interior lining, a pocket so well hidden you'd never see it unless you knew exactly where to look. She pulled out a small black flash drive, sealed, intact. The room went silent. Chen walked to Ruth's laptop, plugged it in, and waited. The screen filled with folders, hundreds of them, thousands of files, transaction records, surveillance photos, audio recordings, bank transfers, names, dates, routes, everything. Chen exhaled slow like she'd been holding her breath for 2 years. She looked over at George, who had come downstairs and was sitting on the floor with Lucy's head resting in his lap. His eyes were on the screen, but his face was unreadable. "Your parents saved everything, son. Everything," Chen said quietly. George didn't say anything. He just stroked Lucy's ears and stared at the flash drive like it was something fragile, something sacred. Ruth's voice cracked when she finally spoke again. "He's been carrying this the whole time?" He didn't know, but the dogs did. That's why they never let him out of their sight. They weren't just protecting George, they were protecting this. Chen closed the laptop. Her jaw was tight. This changes everything. We can move now. We can dismantle the entire operation. But they can too. If the cartel knows the evidence exists, and they do, or they wouldn't be watching, then George just became the most valuable target in the country. The black SUV, the surveillance, the patience, it all made sense now. They weren't just watching George, they were waiting for the right moment to take back what Jack and Becca had died protecting. Dana's article went live at 6 a.m. on a Friday. She had been careful. No mention of the flash drive, no details that could put George in more danger than he already was. Just enough to tell the truth. A boy whose parents were killed protecting evidence that could bring down a criminal empire. A boy being hunted. A boy protected by 7 dogs trained for one mission. By noon, it had been shared 40,000 times. By 3 p.m., every major news outlet in the country had picked it up. By nightfall, an unmarked package arrived at Ruth's door. Inside, a single photograph, George on his morning walk, dogs at his side. A red circle drawn around his head in permanent marker. No note, no fret, it didn't need one. That night, a car bomb detonated 2 blocks south, an old sedan parked outside a shuttered grocery store. The blast shook windows across Lakeview. No casualties, no injuries, just fire and noise and chaos. Every available unit in the district responded. George's street was suddenly empty, unguarded, exposed. The next morning, George walked like he always did. Same time, same route, same 7 dogs. The black van pulled up fast, tires screeching, side door already sliding open before it stopped. 3 men in dark clothing moved with precision, no hesitation, no wasted motion. One of them grabbed for George's arm. The dogs exploded. Milo hit the first attacker like a freight train. Full speed, full weight, a tackle that sent the man crashing into the pavement so hard his head bounced. Max was already on the second man, jaws locked around his forearm with controlled, surgical pressure. Not tearing, not killing, just holding. Luna circled the van, barking sharp, guttural commands that froze the driver in place, hands visible, eyes wide. Scar planted herself directly in front of George, body low, hackles raised, teeth bared in a snarl that promised violence if anyone took one more step. The third attacker lunged past her. Bright came from behind, silent, fast, devastating. The man went down hard. 12 seconds, that's all it took. 3 attackers subdued. No one dead, no one bleeding out. Just 3 men on the ground, hands pinned, bodies locked, every option taken away by 7 Belgian Malinois who had trained their entire lives for this exact moment. George stood in the middle of it, shaking but unhurt, Buddy pressed against his side, solid and warm and there. Sirens wailed in the distance, neighbors poured out of their houses, phones recording, voices overlapping. Ruth was already running down the sidewalk, tears streaming. The van peeled away, door still open, driver fleeing before the dogs could get to him too. Dana stood across the street, heart hammering, camera forgotten in her hand. She had seen the whole thing, the speed, the precision, the absolute, terrifying efficiency. These dogs weren't just protectors, they were soldiers. By that afternoon, the DEA had taken over. Agent Chen coordinated with Chicago PD. Tactical units were briefed, safe houses were prepared. The flash drive had been uploaded, analyzed, cross-referenced. Warrants were being drafted. Arrests were imminent, but so was retaliation. The neighborhood mobilized. Mr. Vickers organized watch shifts. Parents formed walking groups. The cafe owner kept his doors open late, so no one had to walk home alone. The whole block closed ranks around George like a human shield, because they had seen what the dogs could do, and they knew what was coming next. Agent Chen stood in front of a room full of tactical operators, a map of Chicago's South Side projected on the wall behind her. Her voice was calm, clinical, final. The flash drive gave us everything. Warehouse on West 35th, Operational hub. Marcus Vane is inside. He's the operations commander. Take him and the entire structure collapses. She paused, eyes scanning the room. We go tonight. George refused to stay at the safe house without the dogs. Ruth tried reasoning with him. Chen tried ordering him. Neither worked. The boy just sat on the floor, arms wrapped around Buddy's neck, and said nothing. Finally, Chen knelt in front of him. 4 stay with you. 3 go with us. Her voice softened. Deal? George looked at Milo, Max, and Scar. Then he nodded. The dogs knew. Somehow, they always knew. The warehouse was dark, silent, surrounded. SWAT moved into position like shadows, and then the dogs went in first. Milo, Max, and Scar moved low and fast through the loading bay entrance, noses down, ears forward, every muscle locked into the work. The team followed their lead because the dogs weren't guessing, they were hunting. Milo cleared the first corridor in seconds, signaling all clear with a flick of his tail. Max took point at a stairwell, pausing, listening, then moving up. Scar stayed tight with the lead operator, matching his pace exactly. They moved through the warehouse like ghosts, room by room, corner by corner, perfect. Then Milo stopped. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just froze outside a reinforced door and looked back at the team handler. SWAT breached it. Inside, a young man, mid-20s, tied to a chair, duct tape over his mouth, eyes wide with terror and relief. He'd been missing for 3 days. Milo sat, waited. Job done. 2 floors up, Marcus Vane heard the commotion and ran. He knew the layout, knew the exits, knew exactly where to go. He sprinted through a back hallway, hit the loading dock door, shoved it open, and stopped. Scar stood in the doorway, 70 pounds of absolute focus, ears forward, eyes locked, not moving, not attacking, just there. Vane's hand went to his waistband, Scar's lip curled back. He froze. SWAT was on him in seconds, hands behind his back, cuffs tight, done. Across the city, coordinated raids hit every location on the flash drive, stash houses, distribution points, safe houses, money drops, dozens of arrests, millions in seized product. The cartel didn't just crack, it shattered. At the safe house, George sat on the couch with Buddy's head resting on his knee, watching the news on a small TV. Ruth stood behind him, hand on his shoulder. The reporter's voice was steady, professional. A coordinated operation across Chicago's South Side has resulted in the arrests of over 30 individuals connected to one of the largest drug trafficking rings in the Midwest. Authorities credit evidence recovered from 2 slain DEA officers. George's hand tightened in Buddy's fur. The screen showed Marcus Vane being led out in handcuffs, then another face and another. Men who had hunted him, men who had killed his parents, men who would never touch him again. George leaned forward, voice barely a whisper. Mom, Dad, we did it. Buddy's tail thumped once against the floor. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside that safe house, for the first time in 2 years, a boy could breathe. Dawn broke over Lakeview, and the street was quiet. But it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the held-breath tension of a neighborhood waiting for something terrible to happen. Just peace. Simple. Earned. The community gathered in the park that Saturday morning. Folding chairs arranged in crooked rows. A small wooden stage someone dragged out of a church basement. Neighbors of all ages, old Mr. Vickers in his veteran's cap, the cafe owner with her apron still on, kids in hoodies sitting cross-legged on the grass. Agent Chen stepped up to the microphone, a small wooden box in her hands. She didn't need notes. These 7 dogs did something most trained operatives never have to do, she said. They carried out a mission for 2 years without their handlers, without orders, without backup. They protected a child, delivered evidence that dismantled the criminal empire, and saved lives. She paused. And today, we honor them. One by one, she called their names: Milo, Max, Luna, Scar, Bright, Buddy, Lucy. And one by one, a child from the neighborhood stepped forward, shy, proud, careful, and clipped an official DEA Canine Commendation badge onto each collar. The crowd cheered. Some people cried. George stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, watching. Ruth's arm was around his shoulders. When it was over, the children came, tentative at first. A small girl with braids approached, eyes wide. Can I pet her?" she asked, pointing at Luna. George looked at Luna. Luna's tail wagged once, slow, certain. George nodded. The girl reached out, and Luna leaned into her hand, gentle as anything. More children came. The dogs allowed it. For the first time in 2 years, they were not in formation. They were not scanning rooftops or blocking approaches. They were just dogs, and George was just a boy. That afternoon, George went to the cemetery. All 7 dogs walked with him, quiet, close, respectful. He knelt in front of a small bronze plaque set into the ground. Jack and Becca Reynolds, beloved parents, heroes. He placed white flowers at the base. The dogs sat in a line beside him, heads slightly bowed. George stayed there for a long time. Then he reached out, placed his hand flat on the plaque, and whispered something. We don't hear it. We don't need to. The next Monday morning, George walked through Lakeview like he always did. Same time, same route, same 7 dogs. But the formation was looser now. The dogs didn't scan every shadow, didn't flinch at every car. They walked beside him, not soldiers on a mission, but companions on a morning stroll. Neighbors waved from porches. The cafe owner called out a greeting. A kid on a bicycle rolled past, grinning. "Morning, George." George raised his hand. A small wave, quiet, real. And then he smiled. Not a big smile, not the kind you'd see in a movie, just a small, genuine curve at the corner of his mouth, the kind that said, "I'm still here, I'm still standing, and maybe that's enough." The dogs walked with him. The sun rose higher. The street filled with light. True courage is not always loud. Sometimes it lives in silence, in the choice a parent makes to prepare their child for a world they won't be there to face. Sometimes it lives in loyalty, in the dogs who carry out a mission long after the people who gave it are gone. And sometimes it lives in a boy who walks down a quiet street one morning and, for the first time in a long time, smiles.